The last topic in Chapter 2 is retail ownership. There are three ways that a retail establishment can be owned. The first is an independent single store ownership. This is actually the largest group of retail stores. In fact, almost 95% of retail stores are independent single store establishments. These stores are owner managed, which makes them very responsive to customer needs. They can be very flexible to the market, very adaptive. Now, they do have higher priced merchandise because when they order, they're not ordering as many materials at once as some of the different types of retail-owned stores we'll talk about in a second. Retail ownership, which is independent, doesn't necessarily mean that there's one store. So there might be a group of 5 or 10, but they're all owned by the same family unit. So some examples of independent single store establishments are Blackbird Coffee, the local Yokel. Pickle Barrel would be an independent single store establishment, even though they have 4 locations in central Georgia. The second type of retail ownership, it would be a corporate retail chain. This is when a retail chain has multiple retail units under common ownership that has central decision making. So some retail chains that you're familiar with would be REI, Target, Walmart, Bass Pro Shops, Cabela's, etc. So these corporate retail chains are all owned by the same group. Now, some retail chains are part of larger holding companies. So, for example, Victoria's Secret and Bath & Body Works are owned by the same company, which is L Brands, but that common ownership there is at the L Brands level. The third type of retail ownership is franchising. And franchising is a contractual agreement between 2 parties where a franchisor sells the rights of the business to a franchisee. And so these rights include the business trademarks, the logos, colors, recipes, menus, etc. Right, so the franchisee gets all of that. And generally, the franchisee pays a one-time fee, and then they also pay an ongoing royalty fee back. And we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. There are many reasons why a retail owner, retail entrepreneur might want to franchise instead of opening an independent location. The first is the success rate. The one thing you have with franchising, if you franchise, and you can see in the corner some examples, but if you franchise a Dunkin' Donuts, you know that Dunkin' Donuts is a successful business plan already. So if you choose the right market and the right audience, you have a much better chance at survival. A second reason why you might franchise instead of opening an independent retail establishment is that you do get training from the franchisor. So if you open a franchisee, you'll normally get to go to the franchise headquarters and get on-the-job training from the experts. Oftentimes, franchisors will offer assistance in selecting a location. That way, you have a better idea of where a good location would be in order to be successful. And finally, a lot of times franchisors offer advertising assistance. So McDonald's, for example, runs a lot of national TV commercials and radio ads, and they do internet advertising, which is beneficial for all of the franchise owners in smaller cities. Now, even though there are some benefits to franchising, there's a couple of drawbacks that you have to be aware of. The biggest drawback is that you do have to follow all of the rules and operating guidelines that the franchisor sets. You're generally required to purchase materials from specific suppliers, and that's for standardization purposes. But it can be very expensive, and the franchisor can require new purchases at any time. For example, Dunkin' Donuts might roll out a new donut that requires a special piece of equipment in order to bake it properly. And so if you are a Dunkin' Donuts franchise, then you would be required to buy that equipment. So that's an example of something a franchisor could make you do, which could be costly to you. So what do you think it costs? Uh, Generally, an independently owned retail establishment, if you're in the food service, it's going to cost you about $125,000 in startup money. Service retailers, it costs around $15,000, and general retail about $32,000 for startup costs. So what do you think a franchise costs to open? WorldFranchising.com gives us a lot of basic information and insight into franchise ownership. And so I'm going to have you take a look at worldfranchising.com and give us an idea of what the investment is in a franchise of your choice. But I want to talk real quickly about a franchise disclosure document. And if you're truly interested in owning a franchise, you can get access to these franchise disclosure document, which give you a lot of detail on becoming an owner. We're going to look at Great American Cookie today. So Great American Cookies is a franchise. And if you would like to own a Great American Cookie, you might request a franchisee disclosure document, and it tells you lots of information. So the first line we see on there, or the first kind of category, is what it's going to cost to be an owner. And so if you look at that, the franchise fee is $25,000, and that's a lump sum at the signing of your franchise agreement. But then there are other costs that you have to incur as you start your business up. And so you can see that they require you to spend around $3,000 to $5,000 on your grand opening. There's an expense while you're traveling and training. You do have to buy your cookie ingredients. You have to buy your equipment. You have to buy signs. They give you some examples on what the computer system are going to cost, what your local business license might cost, etc. So you can see that to open a Great American Cookies, you're going to need somewhere between $193,000 and $353,000 for a traditional store. So it does add up quite quickly. Other things that you can see in a franchise disclosure document is what types of training and marketing support that franchisor is going to offer to you. And so you can see here that Great American Cookies gives you a brand history, a facility tour. You get access to an operations manual. They're going to teach you how to care for the equipment, how to sanitize dishes and utensils. They're going to teach you how to bake cookies. How to give away samples, how to display things. They're going to talk about opening procedures. They're also going to teach you how to bake specialty products. So that's a couple of things that they're going to offer. And it shows you how many hours of training you'll receive as part of your franchise agreement. Franchise agreements often come with a length of term. And so if I'm going to open a Great American Cookies, my agreement is going to be 10 years. Now, that's a bit risky, right? If you open an independent location, if you're not successful, you can close your business. With a franchise, it's a little bit harder to close that business if you're not successful. Something else that you can see in a franchise disclosure document would be what the ongoing royalty fee is, what the advertising fees are, etc. You can also get on worldfranchising.com, you can look up site requirements. So how many employees you would have to hire, how much space you would need, etc. And so what I want you to do is visit worldfranchising.com and select a franchise. And I want you to go through the list and look at what type of training they offer, marketing support, what the financial requirements are, etc. And this isn't an assignment or anything that you have to write and turn in. But if you do find something that's very interesting, please share it with us in the discussion boards. And let's get a discussion going on some of the more unique franchise ventures that you find and what it's going to cost and what those franchisors provide for us. And that wraps up with Retail Ownership, Chapter 2 of Retailing Management.